Hey there and welcome to Scandal Steep. Rick James was never meant to be ordinary. Long before he became a household name, long before the funk anthems and the infamous Chappelle's Show catchphrases, he was already living like a man destined for legend. But that path wasn't smooth, and it wasn't pretty. It was chaotic, raw, and often violent, mirroring the tempest inside him. For every funky beat he laid down, there was a storm brewing behind the scenes. At the core of it all was a volatile mix of ambition, rebellion, and unresolved anger that followed him from Buffalo to Hollywood. Born James Ambrose Johnson Jr., Rick grew up in Buffalo, New York, where he stood out from the crowd even as a child. While most kids were just trying to figure out who they were, young James already had the swagger of a star. His mother, Mabel, was a strong, independent woman, a former dancer for the legendary Katherine Dunham and a numbers runner to support her children. She exposed James to both the glamorous and gritty sides of life, jazz icons like John Coltrane and Miles Davis on one side, street hustlers and criminals on the other. That duality shaped Rick. He wasn't built to follow the rules or live cautiously. His childhood was marked by early exposure to adult experiences. In his memoir, Glow, Rick recalled losing his virginity at just 9 or 10 years old to a 14-year-old girl. That experience and his self-proclaimed kinky nature would go on to become a defining element of his music and persona. By his teenage years, Buffalo felt far too small for someone like him. He had no interest in fitting in or obeying authority. School didn't hold his attention, and he constantly sought out musicians, artists, and rule breakers, anyone who made him feel alive. While his peers were figuring out what they wanted to be, Rick already saw himself as a star in waiting. His dreams weren't just big, they were inevitable, at least in his mind. When he was 15, desperate to escape the draft during the Vietnam War, Rick lied about his age and joined the Naval Reserve, hoping it would keep him out of combat. But military life didn't suit him. He hated being told what to do and refused to submit to discipline. Instead, he spent his time playing in jazz bands, sneaking off base, and getting into trouble. Eventually, the Navy placed him on active duty, but rather than comply, Rick made a bold move. He fled to Toronto, Canada. That decision would change everything. Toronto in the 1960s was buzzing with musical energy, and Rick quickly found himself in the company of future legends. He rubbed shoulders with artists like Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, and eventually, the three of them formed a rock band called the Mina Birds. Their talent caught the attention of Motown Records, who offered them a deal. It was during this time that Rick first met Stevie Wonder, who, impressed by his talent, asked for his name. Since Rick was still technically a fugitive from the U.S. military, he blurted out a fake name on the spot, Ricky James Matthews. Stevie thought it was too long and shortened it. And just like that, Rick James was born. But his past hadn't forgotten him. The U.S. military eventually tracked him down, arrested him, and sentenced him to a military prison. For most people, that might have been the end. But for Rick, it only deepened his resolve. After his release, he doubled down on his mission to conquer the music world. And soon, he did. By the early 1970s, Rick James was back in the U.S. playing in bands, experimenting with genres, and chasing a solo career. He eventually signed with M Records and released a single titled My Mama. It wasn't a massive hit, but it was enough to keep him going. After a stint in Europe and a few different projects, he returned to Buffalo and formed the Stone City Band in 1977. Together, they landed a new deal with Motown, the same label that had once courted his earlier band. In 1978, Rick released his debut album, Come Get It, introducing the world to a fresh blend of funk, R&B, and rock. The record's breakout hit, You and I, soared to the top of the R&B charts, while Mary Jane became an anthem. The album sold over 1 million copies and gave Motown a much-needed boost during a time when the label was struggling. Rick wasn't just another musician, he was a force. With his signature braids, leather outfits, and unrelenting stage presence, he became a larger-than-life figure almost overnight. His sophomore album, Bustin' Out of L7, followed in 1979 and was another commercial success, cementing his place in the music industry. Rick's shows weren't just concerts, they were spectacles. He toured with future legends like Prince and Tina Marie, the latter of whom became not only a frequent collaborator but a kindred spirit. Their chemistry was undeniable. Songs like Fire and Desire captured a connection so deep, so electric, that it transcended genre. Tina Marie wasn't just a duet partner, she was Rick's creative soulmate. Behind the scenes, they challenged each other, pushed each other to go harder, sing bolder, and be better. In 1981, Rick released what would become his biggest album, Street Songs. It was an explosive mix of rock, funk, and new wave, featuring hits like Give It To Me Baby, Fire and Desire, and the now iconic Super Freak. The album sold over 4 million copies globally and earned Rick a permanent spot in music history. But fame came with a cost. By the time Street Songs was dominating the charts, Rick James was on top of the world and starting to unravel. He wasn't just living the rockstar lifestyle, he was redefining it. Excess wasn't a side effect of success for Rick, it was the mission. Cocaine became as essential to his day as a microphone. Parties stretched for days. Women, money, and power, it all fed his ego, but none of it quieted the chaos brewing inside him. And then there was Prince. Though the media loved to pit them against each other, the tension between Rick and Prince was real. Both were musical prodigies, both had a flair for sex-charged lyrics and fashion, and both refused to be boxed into any one genre. But Rick felt something deeper: resentment. He saw Prince as the industry's new golden child, a copycat who was gaining acclaim using a blueprint Rick had laid down. Rick claimed that Prince stole his entire stage act after opening for him on tour. Whether that's entirely true or not, the rivalry fueled Rick's paranoia, driving him to push harder, party harder, and trust less. As the 80s rolled on, Rick remained a hitmaker, writing and producing for others, including Eddie Murphy's surprise 1985 hit Party All the Time, but his own momentum began to waver. The music was still funky, still infectious, but Rick's personal life was crumbling fast. His drug use spiraled out of control, and so did his temper. He wasn't just indulging, he was self-destructing. Behind closed doors, Rick's behavior grew erratic and abusive. He developed a reputation for being controlling and explosive, especially with the women in his life. While he maintained a flashy public persona, his private relationships were often marked by manipulation and violence. In the early 90s, those demons exploded into the public eye when Rick was arrested twice for brutally assaulting women while under the influence of crack cocaine. The stories were horrifying. One woman claimed he burned her with a hot crack pipe. Another said he held her captive for days. The fallout was massive. In 1994, Rick was sentenced to prison, serving about 2 years of a 5-year sentence. When he got out, the world had changed. Hip-hop had taken over, R&B had evolved, and Rick James felt like a relic of a different time. But even in decline, Rick wasn't forgotten. In 2004, he experienced an unexpected comeback thanks to comedian Dave Chappelle, whose now iconic Chappelle's Show skits, particularly I'm Rick James, B, introduced a whole new generation to Rick's outrageous legacy. Suddenly, he was relevant again, albeit more as a meme than as a musician. But Rick embraced it. He made appearances, laughed along, and milked the attention for all it was worth. That same year, he appeared on stage at the BET Awards, standing next to Tina Marie, looking worn but proud. His exact words, "Never mind who you thought I was, I'm Rick James, B," brought the house down. Just weeks later, Rick James was dead. On August 6, 2004, he passed away in his Los Angeles home at the age of 56. The official cause was heart failure, with multiple drugs found in his system, including cocaine, methamphetamine, and Xanax. His death marked the end of a life that had burned with incredible intensity, a life lived without a filter, without restraint. Rick James left behind more than just music. He left a complicated legacy, one of brilliant creativity tangled up with deep personal flaws. He was a pioneer who blended funk with punk, soul with rock, and broke down racial and musical boundaries. But he was also a cautionary tale about the price of unchecked ego and addiction. Today, we remember Rick James not just as the super freak or the wild man from Chappelle's skits. We remember him as a visionary artist who lived loudly, loved messily, and never apologized for being exactly who he was, fire, flaws, and all.